Hello and welcome to Let's Talk. My guest is Jonny Clark, who is the National Director of Youth with a Mission in Ireland. And in this episode, he talks about his early years in Belfast. Hello, this is another episode of Let's Talk, and my guest today is Jonny Clark of YWAM. He's the director of the organisation here in Rostrevor. So welcome to the show, which is an exciting time to do this show because you've just released a film, which we'll talk about in a short time. What I normally do with these interviews is just to get a little bit of background history, allow the people to talk, have their story told. Tell me a little bit about how did things get started for you, especially as a Christian? What was your journey?
Well, usually whenever I speak anywhere, I have to give a disclaimer that my accent doesn't really fit anywhere. I was born in New Zealand, and when I was just before my 8th birthday, my parents moved to England for a year and a half, and then in the summer of 1984, when I was 9 years old, we moved over here. And I've lived here ever since. Got an American wife and work in an organization that has lots of different nationalities. So for whatever reason, my accent has developed this kind of curious sense of not really fitting anywhere, you know. So, which has its advantages sometimes because it can make me look like I'm an ignorant blow-in, you know, when actually I've lived here 35 years or something, you know. But in terms of faith, I grew up in a strong Christian home. My parents were missionaries, actually. They felt led, my dad was 49 years old, to kind of really essentially sell their house in New Zealand, beautiful house, and follow a sense of vocation that they had to be missionaries. Of course, that word means different things to different people. For them, it really meant a life of service to other people, centered around a deep faith in God, and a belief that He would look after them as they laid down many kind of, I suppose, kind of earthly possessions and stuff like that. I was the youngest of 4 kids, so I grew up into a very religious home, you could say, but it wasn't in any way, you know, sometimes religion can seem kind of dry and dead. For me, it was very life-filled. We moved to Northern Ireland at a time in the middle of the Troubles when everyone was leaving Northern Ireland. You know, when I went to school with a New Zealand accent, the kids were like, I was maybe the first foreigner they had ever met for some of them, you know, it seemed, you know, that who am I and where have I come from and why did I come to Northern Ireland? Of course, not just because of the Troubles. As young kids in Northern Ireland at the time, they just had a pretty low sense of esteem for their own patch of ground, you know. So I kind of grew up here and observed my parents making real great sacrifices for their faith, and whereas some people might have been put off by that, for me it felt electrifying, you know. Not always, I didn't always love it, but there was something about watching my parents living a difficult life of vocation, of sense of calling to people, seeing the reality of the Troubles, watching my parents' living room that was, you know, constantly filled with Protestants and Catholics meeting together. Because the advantage of them being from overseas and from outside of the Northern Irish conflict was that they didn't have some of those cultural kind of barriers or walls that others would have had. They just very naturally went to people no matter what part of the city they lived in or what church they worshipped in or wherever. So they were really good examples of that. And so my faith, I guess, I kind of grew as a young kid. I felt very, very real. I felt God was very, very real. And then when I was 19, I spent a year with Youth with a Mission in South Africa. It was 1995. It was the first year of Nelson Mandela's first term in, the ANC's first term as the government of South Africa. It was the first non-white government of South Africa. And I was there at that time, and I saw a country that obviously was very different from Northern Ireland, the black-white issue and all this kind of stuff, which we don't have over here, but yeah, there were so many similarities. The kind of sense of two groups of people's their ignorance of each other, which bred obvious dehumanization and demonization, even among good, nice Christian folk, you know, who you would expect better of, would come out with these fairly atrocious kind of racial stereotypes and slurs, and you know, but for them it didn't mean anything, and you realize it was just part of them. They had lived that, and I realized that's the same as where I was from, Northern Ireland. Like we have imbibed through our education system, through our separate living. We live in different areas of the city. We've imbibed this sense of them and us and the others over there, and we really don't know them, and they're weird, they're different, and so when I was in South Africa, I was like really struck by the fact that this country has a real similar conflict to what we do, and also I was struck by the fact that religion had been very involved in it, and yet so I was in a funny kind of time in my life where my faith was kind of becoming very alive. I really wanted to do something with my faith, you know, but I was also seeing the consequences of where religion becomes something very toxic and broken and wrong, and is used to justify apartheid, used to justify, you know, land grabs all over the world, you know. The defining moment probably in that year was in the autumn 1995 in Mumbai in India, and I was there to do a Christian evangelistic outreach. And I was there to evangelize many people, you know. And one day I got into a taxi, and the driver of the taxi I soon realized was a Muslim guy. And so I was in the back of the taxi, and I thought, this is my chance to talk to this guy about faith and the true God, you know. And we started talking, and he said, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Northern Ireland, but you've probably never heard of that place. You know, Mumbai is a city of 20 million people in a country of 1 billion people. Like our little 1.6 million people, you've probably never heard of Northern Ireland. And he said, Northern Ireland, that's where the Christians are killing each other. And in the back seat of the taxi, I realized that my evangelistic strategy was not starting very well, you know. You know, not only not starting well, but really actually there was an inherent flaw in much of what I was trying to do. I had a sense of the perfectness of what I believed, and the imperfectness of what everyone else believed, and I was there to be the great savior, so you know, that was a very profound moment in that taxi, you know, where I began to kind of feel a real call to come back to Northern Ireland. I was considering, you know, a life of traveling or a life of being overseas, but felt to come back and be involved in peacemaking here, and felt very much that was a calling of God, you know.
More on the way, so please subscribe to this channel and check out the link below if you'd consider becoming a patron to help us keep making more content. Thanks for watching.